We fear our emotions because we fear that we are them. In this episode of the Soul Sovereignty and Sexuality Podcast with myself, Jessica Falcon, International Soul Embodiment Guide and Divine Feminine Activator, I am excited to talk about emotions, the quote, low vibe label that we give them, and why I disagree, and why our capacity to feel everything that moves through us is essential to reclaiming our sovereignty, to being fully in our power, especially our divine feminine power. And the feminine within all of us has been denied for a very long time. The feminine being our capacity to be here in our bodies, to be fully alive, to feel. Because the truth is, when you are in your heart, which love is the essence of the true feminine, when you are in your heart, you can't help but feel. And so this belief, some feelings are good and some feelings are bad, and if you feel a certain way, you're wrong, or quote, less spiritual, haven't evolved enough, is all based on denial. And here's the thing. Love doesn't need to deny anything. Love, true love, infinite love, divine love, gives you the capacity to be with, to look at everything and transmute it and alchemize it into divine truth. So if you are scared of being with a particular feeling or emotion that is running through you, often it's because you are identifying with that as who and what you are. You're giving it power or authority over you. You believe it will overtake you. If I feel this grief, I'm going to be so overwhelmed with grief, it's never going to end, for example. Or if I allow myself to feel this anger, I'm going to be in so much rage and it's just going to escalate and I'm going to hurt somebody. And the truth is, only those who don't actually feel it get overwhelmed by it. Only those who don't feel their anger thrust it upon others. We say it's feeling your anger when people are in an angry state. That's not necessarily feeling your anger. That's letting the anger overtake you instead of you being the one to witness the anger, to see the anger, to receive the wisdom of the anger. But you still are you, not identifying with it. Can you see the distinction? Those that thrust or throw anger on others are identifying with it, blaming other people. They're in a, quote, lower vibrational state because they are not actually in their divine state. They're not actually in their sovereignty. So let's just parse this out a little bit more. Because so many people are so afraid. And we have all these studies that say anger and grief are lower vibrational emotions. I was talking about this with a client the other day because it's very common, when people come to me, that a lot of the work we do is deep emotional work. I would say that the work I do with my clients one-on-one and in groups is a real interweaving of energetic work, working with your energetic field, an energetic system, and your emotional body and your mental body. Working with all three of those, they're so interconnected. We can't actually separate them. As you attune deeper and deeper to your soul truth and divine sovereignty. And this particular client has been deeply afraid of feeling her grief and has been carrying it around like a burden. I know I used to do that myself, and it's not uncommon to hear that. A lot of the fear comes with this identification with the grief being something that's wrong, that we're not supposed to feel, or so heavy, like a weight. Emotions are energy. Emotion, energy in motion. They become heavy when we don't actually allow them to be in motion. They become a burden when we label it as bad, when we're afraid to feel it, when we think something's wrong with being there in that state. Emotions aren't meant to be carried with us. They're not meant to stay within us. They are meant to move. Yes, our emotions and our feelings are directly connected to our thoughts and therefore our beliefs, which is why we have to do the thought and belief work around our emotions. But what I'm going to focus on in this particular podcast episode is that our perception of a feeling or emotion is what can block it from moving within us. If you simply saw it as pure energy moving through you, and there was no label, there was no judgment, there was no attachment, there was no identification with that emotion, then it has complete freedom to move through you unobstructed. And this labeling of certain emotions as having, say, a lower vibration is essentially based on, of course, it's a judgment. And some would say, well, there's these scientific studies that show it's a lower vibration. I honestly haven't looked at the studies to see exactly how they quantify this, other than the consciousness of the observer affects any scientific study. So if that observer is deeming this as something lower, of course, it's going to show up as something lower. Every emotion serves a purpose, even if that emotion is rising so that you can see the belief underneath, so that you can do the work to heal and come back into your truth, or that contraction in that anger is alerting you to a boundary, or that grief is simply the grief of separation and loss that is normal and beautiful to feel, even though it's not easy. Grief, for example, is often loss-based. I have lost this thing, a relationship, a person's life, a job, a home, whatever that be. And so there's the grief, there's the separation. When you simply see it as energy and an experience that you're having of separation, which unfortunately we do experience separation, have experienced separation on this planet for a very long time because we have been in separation consciousness. And when you can open your heart to that experience, to that emotion, simply witness it with love, you bring that feeling of separation and loss back into wholeness within you. And you allow it to break your heart open. You allow it to open you even more into divine union. I've had this very experience. So I'm not talking in theory. There was one particular moment in my life this was in 2016, March 2016. I had left my partner. I was in Europe. I was alone. And I was in deep grief, not only of the loss of the relationship, the loss of so much, even just ideas and dreams and thoughts and feelings of overwhelm of how do I start my life all over again, from scratch again. And there was one day I let myself lay on my big black thick rubber yoga mat in the place where I was staying, and I allowed the grief to overtake me. I saw nothing but black, even with my eyes open. I was literally thrashing on the floor. I'm sure snot was dripping down out of my nose. I was sobbing and convulsing and shaking and screaming and crying and begging to die, because the grief literally felt like it was eating me alive. It was so intense. But I consciously allowed myself to go there. I could hold my consciousness and allow my body to do what it needed, to allow the emotion to run its course, because I was grieving lifetimes of not actually being loved for who I am. I was grieving so much more. I was grieving the pain of being alive, the pain of seeming separation. I was grieving so much of this. And it got deeper and deeper and deeper. And then boom, all of a sudden, I was like, this immense light entered my chest. And I knew that I had to experience separation from him to know union with myself. And I felt that union. I felt my soul, the truth of union in my beingness. But in truth, I could never actually be separate from anyone or anything. And the grief just stopped. And joy entered. Why? Because the same part of the brain that experiences joy experiences grief. If you don't experience one, you can't experience the other. And so when we label grief as bad, we're actually prohibiting ourselves from experiencing joy. And the heart, the largest electromagnetic force in your body, also cannot be opened, and you pick and choose what you're letting in, what you're allowing to be there and what you're not. When you open your heart, which means you're going to feel grief, and you're going to feel anger, and you're going to feel love, and you're going to feel joy. You're going to feel all of it. You can't pick and choose what you feel when you open the heart. But when you open the heart, what you're opening to is you are opening your heart to everything to be brought back into love, to be brought back into wholeness, to be brought back into union. So you end the pattern of separation from yourself, from life. Your capacity to feel is directly related to your capacity to be fully alive, which is why our capacity to feel as a divine feminine trait, for example, is so linked to our life force energy. I did a whole other episode on how to activate our life force energy, and our capacity to feel is such a key piece of that. Because really, it's about letting energy move through us, letting life move through us. And we can only do this when we have the capacity to observe, to be conscious of, and to not identify with any of that as who and what we are. And the emotion cannot be a low vibration if you are opening your heart to it in love, because then you bring it back into wholeness and union, which is love, which is a high vibration. It's only a low vibration, quote, when you are identifying with it, but also going into a state of victimhood or blame or powerlessness, instead of allowing, which is such a key piece of the work I do with clients, because you cannot transform without allowing the emotion, the underlying belief, the underlying energy to inform you as to where you are or not in your divine power and sovereignty, because everything in life is happening for you. If we start looking at everything as energy, it's a lot easier to understand this. The soul is allowing you to see the ways in which you have separated from source within and tried to seek it without externally. And so the emotion, the pattern, the habit, the belief, the thought, the experience, all of it is allowing you to not only be here, be fully alive, be fully present, but also to experience yourself in the midst of that, and to see where you might be energetically sourcing from something external to you versus sourcing from within, and also to heal wounded ways of being or relating that may have originated in past lives. I call them like energetic miasmas or imprints from past lives or this life, earlier in life, in which there's an energetic dissonance within you and emotion trauma created that continues to keep you outside of yourself or separate from your true power. I could talk about this all day long. But to come back to the ultimate point of this particular episode is, what if you allowed yourself, what if you gave yourself full permission to witness any feeling, emotion that arises within you? Open your heart to it and receive it, knowing it's not you, knowing it does not determine who you are, knowing it does not determine your actions, knowing it's not good or bad, it's not right or wrong, no judgment, no attachment, no blame, no powerless, no victim. I see you. Show me why you're here. I'm willing to be with you in love. I'm willing to bring you back into the wholeness of my heart, into my being. I'm willing to allow you to move through me and inform me. So show me what you want me to see. Show me. Because being fully in your heart, in your body, in your life force, in your feminine power, in your divinity, requires receptivity, receiving. And you can do this when you know you are not it. And then you allow it to be. Because the only thing that keeps it stuck and stagnant is when you attach, or you push it down, or you deny it, suppress. And then it is going to have unconscious power over you, which is the opposite of sovereignty. I hope this is helpful on your journey, your path of reclamation. I will be offering a Divine Feminine Power initiation sometime this fall. There's not much information on the website yet, but there's a wait list if you want to put your name on it, and you'll receive a special discount and first notice when I open the doors to the temple. And the only other announcement for this week is that I was recently featured on the Do Joy podcast with Lisa McCourt, and we had a really powerful and deep dive conversation into freedom and soul embodiment, sovereignty, feminine power. So you can tune into that on all major platforms. I'll put a link below to the podcast, Do Joy Podcast. It came out this week, same week, so you should be able to access it pretty easily. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I love your comments, reviews, subscribe on your favorite platform, and I will see you next week.